Welcome to Politics Unplugged. I'm Ann Trujillo. Here's a word you haven't heard in a long time. Refund. Coloradans are inching closer to their first TABOR refund in years. We just found out this week in new information from the Joint Budget Committee that Colorado taxpayers are likely to get a sales tax refund and an income tax cut. The income tax rate is expected to drop from 4.63% to 4.5%, which means someone who makes $50,000 a year could reap about $65 in savings. The sales tax refund could range between $13 and $41. Now, that word coming just days after the Colorado State Supreme Court ruled that TABOR, the Taxpayer Bill of Rights that mandates that refund, can potentially be done away with, eliminated by a vote of the people. In a 5-2 decision, the court ruled a group can move forward with collecting signatures for a ballot measure. TABOR was put into place back in 1992 so voters could have a say on any tax increase. TABOR also limits how much money the state can keep, requiring Colorado to give back any money over the spending limit. Now, it's long been thought that TABOR could not be repealed because of how complex it is, but the Colorado Fiscal Institute challenged that idea, and the court agreed. Well, joining us to discuss the pros and cons of TABOR are Michael Fields of Colorado Rising Action and the Bell Policy Center's Scott Wasserman. So, gentlemen, thank you for being here. First of all, okay, Scott, you support repealing. Michael, you say it needs to stay on the books. So I'm going to give you each a moment to just explain why, just a general overview.
So I'd be happy to start. I think when we talk about TABOR, we mostly think about the right to vote on taxes. But I think what it's important to talk about is just how complicated TABOR is, how many different things are going on in that amendment, and then really it gets us stuck in a conversation about process. And what we need to talk about and think about is outcomes. And I think every Coloradan at this point is familiar with the fact that our schools are underfunded, that we've got an $11 billion transportation backlog, and much of what's going on in our state's fiscal situation has to do with TABOR. And so, you know, the reason I would support repealing TABOR is that it is perhaps a great idea, but it has gone terribly awry for a state that is really the #1 economy in the country, but is not spending the way a #1 economy should in things like schools and roads and childcare and college. And so it's time to simplify this process and really talk about what our future should be.
All right, Michael, your turn.
Well, TABOR is very popular. Taxpayer Bill of Rights is something that people support more and more since 1992 when it passed. Back then they said that if we passed TABOR that Colorado would be closed for business, that there would be chaos. They even said that we couldn't protect the Pope when he came in 1992. None of that stuff has happened. We do have the #1 economy in the whole nation. And, you know, looking at it, I think a lot of that has to do with TABOR. It has limited government. It has given people a say. The last 6 statewide tax increases have been shot down by voters because they want state government to be more efficient with the money that they do have. And so our budget has grown to $32.5 billion, even under TABOR. And so I think what it comes down to is legislators need to prioritize. People like to be able to vote on tax increases, and they like limiting government.
Because some would say that, yes, because our economy is so strong right now, that it's because of TABOR that everything seems to be working. Colorado is on the right path.
Yeah, so correlation is not causation. I mean, I think that one of the things that makes Colorado very unique is that we have imported educated professionals from the coast who have come in and really, I think, as we all know, changed the look and feel of Colorado. And in our research at the Bell Policy Center, what we see is that those folks have brought their wealth in, have fueled this economy, but we're leaving native-born Coloradans behind. And when you look at what is leaving those Coloradans behind, it's exactly the things that I mentioned earlier, right? It's our lack of investment in education. We have the second highest attainment gap between Latinos and their white peers in the country in terms of higher education. So we see all of these fundamental indicators that show us that, like, Colorado's having its moment in the sun right now, but that moment will not last precisely because we are not investing in the future. And I just want to mention one more thing that Michael referenced, if I may, is that, yes, our budget has grown, but there have been a number of studies and reports that have shown that actually if you look at our budget, when you adjust for things like population and inflation and all the deferred maintenance costs, we're actually spending at 2009 levels, so right at the beginning of the Great Recession. So I think Coloradans know that our population has grown, the demands have grown, and we're just not keeping up. And so we shouldn't be tricked or fooled by looking at just the numbers of our budget, but let's actually ask ourselves, what are the investments we're not making?
Well, hasn't the legislature found a way to work around all of these issues?
They have done a lot of workarounds. You look over the last 10 years, enterprises or fees, and I think people can see that the car fees have gone up, other types of fees that have made the state budget go up in general. We're spending over $1 billion more each and every year. The problem is the prioritization. There's two things mainly that people want done right now. One is fixing our roads. Everybody has a problem with our roads. The second one is the teachers should get paid more. The problem with it is we've done Ref C. We did faster fees increase. We did the hospital provider fee. This is almost $3 billion of new money into the budget each year, and we still haven't fixed our roads. In education, education spending has gone up 20% since 1990, adjusted for inflation. Teacher pay has gone down that same time 20%. So that money's not getting into the classroom. It's not getting to teachers. People agree that our underfunded system for education is there. The problem is how we're spending that money. So they want to have that conversation before saying take any more of our money. Why don't you use the money that you have most effectively?
And isn't this really just so complex that can it be just a simple question of should TABOR be repealed? I mean, is that dangerous?
Well, I actually think that what we need most of all right now is simplicity. I think what makes this conversation really frustrating for Coloradans is that this conversation is so complicated. You know, a presentation on TABOR, which I'll give very often, you know, that takes a half an hour to explain all the different things that are in TABOR. And not only is it just TABOR, but it's the way that TABOR affects local property tax revenue. That's why we have such a problem in the state funding our schools. And so I think one of the beautiful things about the ruling that came down from the court on Monday was it's just practical reasoning that, you know, we voted on TABOR as one question. We should be able to vote it down as one question. And I think what Coloradans want is simplicity, and they want to understand their financial situation of the state, and they just can't because it has become so complicated. And so I think what has ended up happening is that for the advocates of small government, the people who don't want to fund our schools, who don't want to make the kinds of investments that we need, they end up hiding behind the complexity and the process of it all. And I think what we're trying to do is talk about outcomes.
Michael,
well, first of all, we care very much about funding our roads and schools. We wish that the state legislature would do a better job of it. But I think when you look at full repeal, I disagree with the court outcome on that. I think that it was judicial activism because it violates single subject. But we're ready for this battle. We will welcome that debate about full repeal because we think that the people agree with us. And anything that has to do with TABOR voters can have a say in that. And that's the thing, is make the case to voters, say this is why we need more money. They're going to say yes or no. Even the governor came out this week and said, you know, when it comes to full repeal, he's not on board because he thinks that people should have a say in tax increases. So I think, you know, this discussion, if it happens next year, if it happens in the future, we're more than ready to have it.
Gentlemen, thank you so much for your time. We're out of time. We could talk about this for hours, obviously, but